Hello students, today we are going to look into and dive into a new chapter, Art as Technique by Victor Shklovsky. So let's see the summary and analysis. What does the writer say about the art as a technique? So let's talk about the writer. Shklovsky in 1915 essays Art as Technique, which has been hailed as one of the foundational texts of Russian formalism, and it argued that art is not to be perceived in images because images in one's perceptions are mundane and barely carry or the characteristics of an object. Instead, the author argued for art as technique where objects are presented in a strange and unfamiliar way and fashion so as to linger in perception, making a person spend more time perceiving the objects represented in the piece of art. So Shklovsky called this process of defamiliarization or making familiar objects unfamiliar to help one perceive them a new type of concept. Victor Shklovsky was a prominent Russian formalist and literary critic and writer whose concept of defamiliarization is one of the foundational concepts of Russian formalism. He born in Petersburg, Russia, St. Petersburg, and he was active in political and literary activities during the Russian Revolution. Because we have to know about who is the author and what is his background. So I'm just briefing you the details of Shklovsky. Shklovsky opposed Bolshevism, which was the fast left Marxist faction for which he has also imprisoned, and he was pardoned in 1919 due to his connection to Maxim Gorky. So Shklovsky also took an active part in the Russian Civil War and he died in 1984 in Moscow. So art as a technique serves as a seminal essay on Russian formalism that primarily argues against the common maxim that the art must be perceived in images. The concept of defamiliarization influenced later generation to perceive the work of art anew as anew, and its function lies in making the familiar renewed to differ perception, resulting in experiencing sensations anew. So defamiliarization becomes a landmark in the concept in literary studies and revolutionized the study of literature. So Shklovsky attacks an idea of art as imagistic, that is, art interpreted by thinking in images. Instead, he argues that the images barely change over time, historically speaking. So, poet are group according to the arrangement of images rather than creating them. For them, images belong to God alone. Thus, imagistic art barely includes all aspect of art, not even all aspects of verbal art. So he goes on to say that art might be intended as prosaic since it provides the aesthetic pleasure, but was not created with that intent, and accepted as poetic or intended as poetic and accepted as prosaic. Thus, art is usually how we perceive it, and instead of having an object image for its interpretation. He elucidates how imaginary can be practical means of thinking or be poetic, which reinforces a sensory emotion, perception, and the automation of the same become so habitual that one's life become mechanical. By this algebraic method of thought that only recognizes objects by their main characteristics instead of recognizing them in their entirety. This tendency, Shklovsky argues, creates an economy of perceptive effort. So the habitualization of perception thus makes life extremely mundane, and art exists to regain the sensation of life, to make one feel thing as one perceives them, instead of how the object represented in art. So he puts forward his concept of defamiliarization. Art function is to defamiliarize us from object, so its artfulness matters, and not only the object itself. By giving the example of Leo Tolstoy, who employed this technique often, he argues for the unfamiliarity of an object represented in art, such that it is recognized through perception and not one's knowledge of the same. So Tolstoy does this by describing objects and events as if he were experiencing them for the first time. So, in the second part of his essay, Shklovsky argues that an does not serve as a means to know an object but merely creates a vision of it. He talks about how poetic language is defamiliarized language. Quoting Aristotle, he writes that poetic language is strange and wonderful, while practical language is used for communication. So, it does not carry the satisfaction that poetic language has. Poetic language deviates from syntax to common lexical structure to delay perception, creating lingering effect. There are irregularities thus in art, and it attempts to codify and systematize these irregularities have been made, but such a system in Shklovsky argument won't work. In any work of art, deviation from defamiliarization is a prerequisite for the artwork to have artistic credibility, making habitual perception deautomized and renewed. So, if we analyze whole essay, it comes that Shklovsky argument for defamiliarization or restraining was a radical concept that aimed to portray everyday things in a new manner for people to perceive them anew. The primary function of art is to restrain the habitual or defamiliarize the familiar to break the monotony of perception. So he refused the maxim that art is thinking in images, arguing that these images barely change. Instead, because we perceive the same images throughout history, one loses the ability to really understand an object, if not for its primary characteristic. So art has the ability to alter that. It is through the technique of defamiliarization or in presenting object in unfamiliar fashion that it will linger in perception and allow people to break the drudgery of perception in everyday's life. He argues that art exists to impart the sensation of things as they perceive and not as they are known. The process of perception is aesthetic and in itself, and it should be delayed. So he quotes that Tolstoy to a great extent to make a reader understand this technique by substituting religious word with the absurd and sacred with the profane. Like Tolstoy described myriad of the emotions and events in his work like War and Peace, Shame, etc., as if he has experienced them for the first time, allowing the reader to Tolstoy to perceive the said events anew. So art is an evolving technique instead of representation of an object. Many techniques develop following Shklovsky idea, especially the Wolfram Dugest effect or alienation effect, of which Bertolt Brecht was a pioneer. So, like in poetic speech, Shklovsky argues it deformalizes, it distorts syntax, phonetic, and lexical structure, whatever the structure of poetic language, which is obviously done to differ perception and prolong it. So it is different from practical speech, which is used for communication, like we have talked in a straightforward way. So, like, it has no room for aesthetic pleasure in daily communication. There is no aesthetic pleasure in our communication mode. Then he mentions writer like Remizov, Essensin, etc., to say that literature is moving toward the employment of dialect. And even Maxim Gorky has abandoned the old literary diction to use new literary colloquialism. He already used some phonetic and lexical structure, but later on he has used uh, many new things. So poetic speech in light of many development, he quotes that is it is a form speech, while prose is ordinary speech. So he just differentiate between the poetic and the prose language. So by this way, the concept of defamiliarization occurs within the uh, various things. So I hope you like my lecture and video, and please give a thumbs up if you like my video, and please subscribe to my channel for further PPT and further lecture. And if you want any further from my side, so just mention in the comment box and I will be uh, um, uh, preparing for you. I will be start for preparing to you. So I hope you like my video, and please subscribe, and thank you for watching.